So I've just spent a little bit of time trying to get this wiring in some sort of manageable state, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out actually. So I've got these wires here which run down beside that bottle, which go to the regulator rectifier tray, which is in episode 10 if you haven't seen that. So that's down inside there. All that's going to be in this tray here is obviously the Shorai battery, and that's a tiny little battery as you can see. I'll have to extend this because that's where the starter solenoid is. So I'm going to extend that to here. Just need to put an earth off that, and everything else is pretty much, it works. So I've just bunched a whole heap of that wiring together. That's the flasher unit, that fits in there as well. It's not flush obviously, but the seat is going to have a little bit of a rise there to keep in line with this when I put the hoop on. And all this wiring here is pretty much, once I get this all sorted with the hoop and the rear mud guard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tidy all this up properly. But for now, just to make sure it all works, this is just the wiring for the rear tail lights and the blinkers. So just to make sure this is all going to work, I pretty much bunched it all together and it's condensed, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's pretty cool the way it's all worked. Obviously this wire here is the earth for the battery, which I'll relocate, and this one here is the starter solenoid, so that'll have to come up with this as well. And other than that, she's done. Like, the wiring is sorted in the internal side of things. Obviously I still need to do something up here at the front for the headlight and the gauges and whatever I do up there, but most of that stuff can be tucked in usually in the back of a headlight, so we should be all good. If you're interested in this little battery, I mean, it's so light. I mean, this weighs probably about a little bit heavier than my mobile phone. And that is the actual specs on the battery if you're interested in it. I'll leave a link in the description for you. They are an absolutely awesome battery, and the thing is with these guys is, yes, you can go and buy a battery that's going to be cheaper and it's going to be a little bit bigger than this one, but a couple of years down the track and you'll have to replace it. These guys, man, I've seen some reviews of people having these for over like 7 years and they're still going strong. You pay the extra money for a good battery, and let's say for instance I decided to, not particularly this bike, but the CB750, if I wanted to sell the bike, you can always change it out with a stock battery and relocate it to somewhere down here. And because this is a Scrambler build that's on a budget, I took a risk on buying an expensive battery because I wanted to locate it here and I wanted a small one. So yeah, it is an expensive thing to do to get a battery like this, probably the most expensive part of the entire build, but I just think it's worth it due to the fact that I only have to buy it once, and if I have 7 years or even 10 years out of this battery, it's well and truly worth its money. And the fact that it is so small and it can work with the regulator rectifier. This brand, I spoke to them on the phone, this particular brand, and they said yes, you can use it with the standard regulator rectifier, so that is a bonus as well. I don't have to buy another regulator rectifier to make this charge. Obviously I'll do tests once it's running to make sure it's not overcharging or not doing anything silly, but that's what they recommend. So hey, 7 years, 10 years out of that, and I will be stoked. So what I'm going to do with this tank is I have an idea on the color that I want to go with. So I got a sample pot which I'll brush on just to check to make sure it's exactly the color that I want. I'm just going to give it a light sand just quickly. I'm not going to do the whole paint stripping thing just yet. I'm just going to take a little bit of the the rough surfaces off and the bubbles from the rust in here, and just to try and get it back so that the paint would stick. Then I'm going to put the paint on with a brush just because I've got a sample pot of it, and put it back on the bike and just check it out and see if that's the color that I want to go with. Obviously I'm not going to be able to see the whole picture because there's other things that need to get done to the bike, like painting the engine, and there's little things like the seat that need to be done to put on the bike. But once the tank's done, then I'll just leave it like that for a while until until the seat's done, and then at that stage I can either decide to change the color or go with that color that I went with. When I've 100% decided on that color, I will be stripping this paint off to bare metal. I'll be sanding it all down nicely. I'll be priming it and painting it with a spray can, probably just a spray can like a rattle can, just because obviously the budget. If I was to take this to a professional painter, you're probably looking around $300-400 at a guess. I don't know, but it would be magic to do that, but obviously not in the budget for this build. I thought I'd explain that just in case you see me putting paint on with a brush and you're like, Dan, what are you doing? It's just a sample, just to see if I like the color. That's the only reason I'm doing it this way. So let's give this a bit of a light sand, get rid of all those rough surfaces, and throw some paint on and see what you think about the color. Obviously, a green tank on a black frame with an unfinished bike is never going to look, you know, fantastic. So I'll leave it for now. I'll leave it in that color. I'm not going to do any more to it. But once I put the tan or leather seat on here, and maybe even do leather grips. I don't know if I'm going to do leather or just brown grips, or maybe even just leave them black. I think that's what's going to make a big difference anyway. The contrast between the brown and the green on this bike is going to look absolutely awesome, I think. I could potentially change my mind. That's why I went with this sample pot, because I just wanted to test it, stand back and look at it and see if it's exactly what I want, because there's so many different colors out there that I could have chose. I was going to do a bit of a breakdown on price on where I'm at with this build so far, but what I've decided to do is I'll wait to the very end and then just add it up for you and just show you what it's cost me in the total. But I can tell you one thing, it's going to be a huge challenge. Where it sits at the moment, I'm well and truly over halfway through the budget, and I've still got a few things still left to purchase, which I can't get around. Like, I need obviously get a seat. I may end up doing that myself. I just get the materials. I still need to get a set of gauges unless I use the original ones, the headlight, the blinkers, the tail light. So there are things that I just can't get away from having to purchase, and that is just how it is. So hopefully we can make the challenge, but if not, it's a learning experience for anyone who wants to do this themselves, because whatever your budget is, if you're building a scrambler or a cafe racer or any custom bike, work out what it's going to cost you and then just add more to it is the simplest way I can put it. Generally speaking, when I look at projects like this, I go, okay, work out exactly what I think it's going to cost and then double it, because realistically you don't know what you're going to come up against until you start pulling things apart, and you don't know what things are really going to cost until you start purchasing them. And that's just life. Always just remember that budget, whatever you decide it's going to be, try and double it if you can, because there's things you just will not know that they're there until you get to them. If you want to see little bits and pieces or sneak peeks of parts that I'm working on this bike or the CB750 Cafe Racer before I actually make the video, then go and check them out on my Instagram. I upload things on there just because it's easier to upload obviously a photo than it is to do the whole video edit. So if you're not following me on Instagram, like I said, go and check me out. It's caferacergarage.07, so that way it gives you a chance to see what I'm about to post in the next video or two before it actually comes onto the channel. So today I spent a little bit of time driving around and doing a few little bits and pieces, getting stuff that I needed for obviously this guy here, the CB750. The linkage seems to be a little bit of a problem. So this linkage, to get it to be a reverse thread to buy the die, wasn't exactly a cheap fix. But I ended up grabbing one because I'll probably end up doing something similar to this again at a later stage. So I'm just waiting for that die to turn up so that I can set the rear sets up. But while I was out, I ended up grabbing some samples from my upholstery guy. For the Scrambler build, I will probably be building the seat myself, doing all the upholstery, the foam work, as well as the stitching on a sewing machine. So I wanted to grab some material. But for this one here, the CB750, I'm going to be getting a diamond pattern put through the seat, so I want my upholstery guy to do that because he's going to do an awesome job of it. And also this seat with the hump he's also going to do. So I've been spending a bit of time trying to figure out what shade of brown or what texture I want for the seat for this. And I've come down to 3. Out of all these samples here, I'm pretty much picking from the one. I've come down to 3 colors. So what I decided to do, instead of just picking one, I've got 1.5 meters of each particular color, so that when I've got a big sheet of that material, I can really just lay it down and just figure out exactly which one out of those 3. It's not very expensive to buy this vinyl. So when the material turns up, I'll probably lay it over the seat and then get some sort of pencil that I can rub off and then just do some markings on there with the diamond pattern that I have in mind, just to try and get a size of the diamonds and how big I want them, because you don't want anything that's going to look obviously too big or too small. So I'm going to spend some time just trying to mimic that and trying to get similar to the hand grips that I've got on this bike, to sort of match. I don't know if I'm going to stick with these hand grips, but I do like the design. So once that turns up, I may even at a later stage do some sort of leather grip on those hand grips as well and do the same pattern. So those three colors are fairly similar. It's more or less just the, I guess the texture is what I was kind of after more than anything, to make it look as close to real leather as I possibly could. So after some soul searching and some pondering over a beer, I realized that this green is probably not the green that I want to go with. It's meant to be a military green, and it probably is. And so I've recently found out that there's so many different military greens that are out there. There's just so many different variations from different countries and different companies that make the paint. So I found an olive green. This is more of like I guess a lighter green than the olive that I chose. So I'm going to take this tank off now and repaint it in the olive green that I've decided to go with. So that's more of that olive military look that I was after. It is still gloss at the moment just purely because it's wet. Hopefully it dries matte, because matte is kind of what I asked for. So yeah, I'll show you again once it dries and bring you back and show you what it looks like. A little bit like my hat actually, funnily enough. Speaking of olive green and hats, I got something cool to show you. I don't know if you've had a chance to go and check out Jish, his merchandise. He has hats and key rings. I think he has shirts as well. Anyway, he's got a brand called Cafe Club. And I have one of his hats and a couple of his keyrings to show you. The hat got a little bit wrinkled in the mail, so it's not holding its shape unfortunately, but it will. I'll fix it up, but I just want to show you it anyway. Yeah, so this is definitely the color that I was going for. As you can see, now that paint has dried, it's more of a matte finish. It's got a slight gloss to it, but now I've got to try and get this in a rattle can, spray can, so that I can put it on nicely. And I'm going to have to do something here where the badge used to sit, because I'm probably not going to use the original badges. But as you can see, that color looks awesome. I've had to quickly put the bike where it is now, and pretty much pack the other two away as well, because we had to bring the car in on the other side, just purely because we have a storm on its way. It's apparently two storm cells colliding, so it's going to be a decent storm. Maybe some hail in it. Put the car away so it doesn't get smashed. But for now, that color is what I'm thinking. I don't know if I'm going to do the front guard and maybe the back guard as well to match it, or if I'm just going to do the tank and leave these guys black. Still yet to decide, but I guess soon we'll find out.
And I feel